So we can see from Rihanna's research that the demands in the components industry are continually shifting with growth drivers such as advancements in manufacturing technologies and industrial automation, as well as the rising demand for precision in critical applications. It would seem that no matter what components you're supplying, you all have your work cut out for you. So let's get into it. Let's start with you, Lee. In the context of rising demand for precision and customization, how is Harmonic Drive supporting engineers in meeting increasingly stringent quality standards while managing the complexity of design iterations?
Well, for Harmonic Drive, a lot of our demand that we see now and coming in the near future is primarily coming from the robotics market. And as you alluded to earlier, a lot of that is these companies wanting to automate, to be more competitive, to increase efficiency, reduce lead times. And we're doing the same thing internally with our own production of our strain wave gears. So that demand, I think, is going to continue. Internally, how we're handling this increased demand is by, again, automating our manufacturing capabilities, and especially for higher volume applications that we see coming.
Okay. Annika, what is SKF doing to help engineers meet the stringent standards and manage design iterations?
We see a heavy influence on the evolvement of AI tools, of digital twins, and how that affects the design process. So virtual testing, we're doubling down on that because then each engineer can iterate so many more times in that same time space. And you'll reach so much closer to the end design, before you have to do any physical testing. So that gives us a shorter time to market, but it also supports our engineers to be more innovative, to do more in a shorter time, and actually, consider customer demands much earlier in the design process. So digitalization, digital twins, and the digital thread throughout the company in R&D all the way out to operations and manufacturing is one key area in how we actually drive this forward and help our engineers to meet the tough demands of the changing world out there. And of course, the other part of that, sustainability, really being able to measure the sustainability impact of our products. That's a tool that our engineers need today that they didn't need before. So we need to know the CO2 impact of each and every product that we produce and that we design. So we're putting those tools into the hands of our engineers as well to be able, to serve our customers better.
Great, thank you. And Mike, how is SPIROL tackling these as well?
We try to tackle this by actively pursuing opportunities that we can offer benefits to in terms of simplicity with fasteners. We do support the market with our own automated equipment. We do also work with many customers that are heavily automated. That requires additional investments in our part for inspection equipment and ways to bring the lowest possible PPM. Obviously, lights out manufacturing, for example, is a growing trend and something that we're always concerned with, especially at high volumes. We certainly don't want to be responsible for any disruptions in production. So essentially keeping our ear to the ground, looking for trends for specific tolerance requirements, et cetera, that particular robotics might require. And we've observed that is continually growing, especially with the EV market, EV wind, hydrogen electrolyzers, all markets that we are now heavily invested in.
So Brianna had also mentioned the scarcity of skilled engineering resources. And I know Annika mentioned the digital solutions. So what tools, designed for manufacturing practices or other digital solutions, do you each recommend to optimize component design and reduce reliance on that scarce expertise? And Mike, I'll just go ahead and start this with you first.
In our area, we've been fortunate not to have encountered a shortage in that regard. Though certainly with the advent of AI, as we all know that with increasing requirements for tighter tolerance, inspections, packaging, PPM, that the administrative burden and overhead is continually growing. So in that regard, I suspect that AI will be rolled out and become more heavily utilized to perform those functions and take some of that burden off of those people whose expertise we need in actual design and manufacturing.
We've also been pretty fortunate from an engineering resource to handle, the day-to-day business thus far. That being said, going forward, one area where we see increased requirements coming from the market and our customers is on the quality side. Just recently, you guys have heard of PPAPs. All these companies, it used to only be medical, but now that's transferring to other areas too, where the resource burden coming from those requirements, we're going to have to change our process internally on how we support that, because it's really important to meet all the market's demands for that. And we've been we're going through some growing pains now, but going forward, hopefully we can use some AI or some technology to help facilitate and turn that around.
Well, we talked earlier a little bit about the virtual testing and really kind of utilizing all of that data. I mean, all companies are drowning in data these days. There's no scarcity of data, right? So we just need to make sure that that data can be at the fingertips of our engineers. And that then comes back to the discussion, not only on virtual testing, but also on design automation. So design automation is really using AI and the digital tools and access to the right data that you have within your company and that your customers have to be able to design that next generation of products with that data and inherently actually automate that design process as well. You'll never be able to take the engineer out of the process, but you will be able to use that engineer on the level, where they also are happier at work. They get to do more high quality work, and that actually attracts people in the end. And coming to the fact that there's a scarcity of engineers in the world, that we see especially in the AI and data space that there is a scarcity. It's hard to find good people working, knowing AI and mechanical components both. We can find good AI people, you can find good people who knows mechanical components, but very few know both. So how do you do that? Well, that's upskilling of the workforce then. So we're doing broad programs on getting AI and digital tools out into the fingertips of our mechanical engineers. And then we look at our software and AI people, and we teach them about the basic industrial components part and the mechanicals and the material science and all of that. So it's also about upskilling and getting people to want to work for you with culture that promotes innovation. So many facets of this, not only the digital tools.